They were told help was coming. They believed it, until the bullets stopped caring. October 1918. Deep in the mist-choked forests of the Argonne, nearly 700 American soldiers found themselves cut off, surrounded, and forgotten. No food, no water, no way out. They had charged into the jaws of death, obeying an order that would doom most of them. For 6 days they held out, bleeding, starving, and dying, while friendly artillery rained down upon their own position. They became known as the Lost Battalion. But were they really lost, or simply abandoned? You see, what happened in that lonely ravine wasn't just a battle, it was a test of what the human spirit can endure when the world stops listening. And maybe, just maybe, it's a story we've all forgotten, because remembering it means facing our own guilt for letting history fade. So before you scroll away, ask yourself, if you were trapped with no hope, would you still fight? Or would you give up? Stick with me, because by the time this story ends, you'll understand what true sacrifice means. And you might just feel that clicking subscribe is the least we can do to honor those who never made it home. It was October 2nd, 1918, the final weeks of the First World War. The air reeked of gunpowder, fear, and exhaustion. The Meuse-Argonne offensive was raging, and the American Expeditionary Force had orders from General Pershing himself. Break through the German lines, no matter the cost. The mission was simple on paper: push through the Argonne Forest, link up with French forces, and crush the German defenses. But the Argonne was no ordinary forest. It was a labyrinth of death. Dense thickets, tangled vines, and hills so steep you couldn't see 10 feet ahead. Machine guns hid in shadows. Snipers waited like ghosts. Leading the charge was Major Charles Whittlesey, a quiet New York lawyer turned reluctant warrior. He wasn't a man who sought glory, he just believed in doing his duty. Behind him were 9 companies, men from the 77th Division, mostly factory workers, bakers, and clerks from New York City. Kids who'd never seen battle until now. They marched forward under the promise that French troops would flank left and American units right. Together, they'd crush the enemy pocket. Except, something went horribly wrong. As Whittlesey's men advanced, they realized something terrifying. There were no French soldiers, no Americans on the right, only Germans. By midday, the radio lines went dead. Pigeons, yes, carrier pigeons, became their only lifeline to command. They pressed on anyway, clinging to orders. Hold your ground! By the next dawn, they were surrounded. The ravine they'd charged into was a bowl of green hell, steep slopes, trees blackened by shell fire, mud swallowing boots whole. From every direction, German machine guns opened up. Men dove into foxholes, clawed dirt with bare hands, screamed as bullets tore through branches above. Whittlesey's face turned pale, but his voice stayed calm. "We hold here. No retreat." He sent out scouts. None returned. He sent runners. None came back. The men whispered, "Sir, are we cut off?" Whittlesey simply nodded. "Then we dig in." And that's when the nightmare began. The first night was chaos. Artillery shells rained down like thunder from the sky, not from the Germans, but from their own American guns. Friendly fire. Whittlesey screamed at his men to stay down as trees exploded into splinters. The ravine lit up like a funeral pyre. They tried sending up flares, waving sheets, even sending carrier pigeons to stop the bombardment. But communication had collapsed. By morning, dozens were dead or dying. One soldier's legs were gone. Another clutched his best friend's dog tags, whispering for his mother. They had no medics, no food, and no clean water, just muddy puddles laced with blood and gunpowder. Whittlesey wrote in his journal that day, "We are hemmed in on all sides. I shall hold this position regardless of consequences." The men admired him, but they also feared him. Some whispered that he'd gone mad, that he was willing to die for orders that made no sense. But Whittlesey knew something they didn't. Surrender meant death anyway. As days passed, the forest grew eerily quiet, except for the buzzing of flies. German loudspeakers echoed through the trees. "Americans, you are surrounded! Surrender and live!" No one moved. Instead, they huddled closer together, gripping their rifles tighter. Some prayed. Others stared blankly into the mud. One soldier muttered, "If anyone remembers us, tell them we fought." And that's exactly what we're doing right now, telling their story, so they'll never be forgotten. So if you're still watching, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will break your heart, and they deserve your witness. By October 4th, the situation was desperate. Half their food was gone, most of it stolen by rats. Men were drinking from shell holes filled with mud and the remains of fallen comrades. The air stank of rot and gunpowder. Whittlesey had tried everything to reach headquarters. Field phones, cut. Runners, shot. Flares, misread. All that was left were carrier pigeons, fragile, trembling creatures that seemed almost laughable against the roar of war. But sometimes, the smallest wings carry the heaviest hope. One of those pigeons would become a legend. Her name was Cher Ami. Whittlesey scribbled a final message, his hands shaking from exhaustion and fury. "We are along the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it." He tied the note to Cher Ami's leg, whispered a silent prayer, and released her into the smoke-filled sky. Moments later, crack! A German bullet tore through her breast. Another shattered her leg. But she didn't stop. That tiny bird, bleeding, half-blind, and broken, flew 25 miles back to headquarters. When she arrived, her message tube was hanging by a thread, but it was enough. The shelling stopped. The Lost Battalion was still alive. It's strange, isn't it? Hundreds of men surrounded by death, and the one who saved them wasn't human. If that doesn't humble us, if that doesn't make us feel something, then maybe we've forgotten what faith looks like. So before we go further, take a second. Subscribe, so that stories like this, stories of impossible courage, never fade into silence. Relief never came that day, or the next. By the 5th day, only 194 men were still able to fight. They were surrounded by over 4,000 German soldiers. The Germans tried everything: bullets, gas, even kindness. They tossed notes into the ravine promising food and safety if the Americans surrendered. Some men begged Whittlesey to consider it. He didn't. "We will not surrender," he said. "We will not go back." It wasn't bravado, it was defiance against despair. Every man knew what that meant: starvation, infection, death. But still, they held their ground. The wounded moaned through the night, whispering prayers that never reached home. The soldier wrote in his diary before dying, "Tell my mother I didn't run." In the morning, scavengers, rats and crows feasted on the fallen. Men used rifle butts as shovels to bury their friends, covering them with mud that smelled like metal and blood. Some began hallucinating. Others simply stared at the horizon, waiting for an end that wouldn't come. And through it all, Whittlesey refused to falter. He barely slept. He rationed himself to sips of water, morsels of bread. When someone asked if he was afraid, he replied, "Fear is a luxury I can't afford." Imagine that level of resolve. Could you stand that kind of torment without breaking? Would you? If your answer is, I don't know. Then good. It means you're human. But these men, they were something else entirely. By October 6th, hope was fading fast. Food was gone. Ammunition nearly spent. They boiled leather belts for soup. They ate roots, leaves, even insects. Some resorted to drinking rainwater wrung from their socks. A corporal broke down sobbing, crying out for his mother. Another begged Whittlesey to shoot him and end it. Still, he wouldn't. "No one dies by our hand," he said. "If death wants us, it'll have to work for it." Then came the worst, gas shells. A yellow-green mist rolled into the ravine's searing lungs and eyes. Men coughed until they vomited blood. Others clawed at the dirt, trying to bury their faces for air. They had no gas masks left, only scarves and mud. When the cloud finally drifted away, 30 more were gone. The remaining men, maybe 150 by now, looked more like ghosts than soldiers. Eyes sunken, lips cracked, skin gray. Whittlesey stood on a rock, looked around at what was left, and whispered, "Hold on. Someone has to know we're here." But no one came. For those men, the forest had become the entire world, a nightmare without end. And that's the cruel truth of war. Sometimes survival isn't about bravery. It's about enduring what no one should ever endure. If this story breaks your heart, good. That means you still have one. Honor them. Subscribe. Because their pain built the peace we take for granted. By day 6, the Germans launched a final assault. They came screaming through the fog, bayonets glinting, grenades exploding like thunder. The Americans met them head-on. Every shot counted, every scream echoed. One private, barely 19, stood on a mound firing until his rifle melted in his hands. When he was hit, he shouted, "Tell Whittlesey I didn't give up!" before collapsing. The Germans broke through, only to be driven back by sheer fury. When the smoke cleared, the ravine looked like another planet. Blackened earth, twisted trees, bodies everywhere. Whittlesey was still standing. Exhausted, bloodied, but unbroken. He didn't know it yet, but the sound of gunfire echoing from the east wasn't the enemy. It was the relief force. After 6 days of hell, help was finally coming. On October 8th, American troops reached the ravine. The men of the Lost Battalion, what was left of them, could barely move. Out of nearly 700, only 194 could still stand. The rest were dead, missing, or too wounded to speak. When medics arrived, the survivors didn't cheer. They didn't even smile. They just stared. Silent, hollow, disbelieving. Whittlesey didn't say a word. He simply saluted, then sat down and wept. The rescuers were stunned. They'd heard rumors about what happened, but nothing prepared them for the sight. A pit of horror carved into the heart of the Argonne. It wasn't just victory. It was resurrection. When news reached America, the Lost Battalion became instant legends. Newspapers called them heroes. Whittlesey was awarded the Medal of Honor, alongside several others. Cher Ami, the little pigeon, was given a medal too. Stuffed and preserved, she stands in the Smithsonian today, a tiny reminder of impossible courage. But fame couldn't erase the scars. Many survivors couldn't sleep again. Some took their own lives. The war had ended, but the nightmare hadn't. Major Whittlesey, hailed as a hero, found himself haunted by the screams of his men. 3 years later, on a voyage to Cuba, He threw himself overboard. His body was never found. Maybe he went back to the ravine, at least in spirit. Maybe he couldn't live in a world that had already forgotten. And that's the tragedy. The medals shine, but the souls behind them fade quietly into history, unless we remember them. So here we are, over a century later. The world has changed, but have we really learned? When you walk freely today, when you scroll through your phone, when you breathe air that isn't filled with gas and fear, it's because they endured. Men who were told they were lost. Men who refused to surrender. Men who died so others could live in peace they'd never see. And yet, most people have never even heard their names. That's on us. Every forgotten hero, every untold story, each one fades because we didn't care enough to keep it alive. So don't let this just be another video you watch and forget, because remembering them is the least we can do. And if their courage meant something to you, share it. Tell someone. Let their story echo louder than the silence that followed. They were never lost, Whittlesey once said. The world just took too long to find them.